Hi, I'm Rob Patz.
And I'm Kristen Stanton.
And this is the Rob and Kristen Show. Welcome to another edition of the Rob and Kristen Show. And we appreciate each and every one of you that watch every week. I'm blown away by it. I'm so thankful and just really truly appreciate each and every one of you. Of course, kind of a sad edition of the show. You know that? It's kind of sad for all of us readers.
All of us readers.
All of us readers.
Well, this is the last installment of what Rob has called our summer reading series.
Yes, because reading is so important.
No, but it is really a lot of fun. We said it on one of the shows a couple of weeks ago that, hey, when you're going someplace, you want to take that book along, read it in the car, read it at the airport. It's a lot of fun.
Read on the plane, especially if the plane, we talked about that, doesn't
have
IFE. No, that's scary when that happens. But we are so thankful for a lot of great writers who've taken time over this series to talk to us about their books, because I always find it really inspiring to me. I am not a writer by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not really a reader, but I enjoy hearing the thought process.
Our first guest on today's show is Joanna Davidson Politano, and she has a book called The Curious Inheritance of Blakely House. It's got a little mystery, a little intrigue, and it's a lot of fun. Let's check that interview out now.
And one of my favorite features here on the show, and I love it because, well, then I don't have to work, is when we have these author interviews. My wife has that big smile, and she looks amazingly happy, and I get to basically sit in the background and do production, which is a lot of fun for me. But the one thing, Kristen, I've learned is these authors have some incredible life stories besides the books that they read.
Oh, just absolutely incredible. And one of the things about authors is they're amazing storytellers. And so when you have them on as interviews, they also tell an amazing story during the interview. And it's so much fun, not just hearing just about the books, but also hearing about some of the inspiration and how they got to be where they are and how God has called them. And I'm really excited to talk with our featured author on today's show, and that would be Joanna. Joanna, thank you for joining us.
Hi, I'm honored to be here.
So tell our viewers a little bit about who you are. And I know we talked a little bit off camera, and you've got 8 books that you've written now. So tell us a little bit about who you are and how in the world did you ever get started writing books?
Honestly, okay, so I'm a homeschool mom, and I've been a medical writer, I've been an editor, I've been all sorts of things. But I've read books for as long as I can remember, just all the time, having a bad day, having a summer break, whatever, I was reading and reading. And so I don't know, I think I think in stories.
Mhm.
And so it was not much of a leap to go to writing like novels and things like that.
So you are telling me off camera that you've been writing since, and I thought this was really super interesting. You were writing when you were in elementary school, and you were
Yes.
making stories about and making people into superheroes, right?
Yes. So I wrote anonymously, and all the kids who would get bullied, I would write them as superheroes into stories. And sometimes I would write the bullies in and make sure that something silly happened to them or something. But yeah, I found like so much power in telling stories and how it impacted the people who read them.
That is so interesting. I love that. I mean, even as a little girl, God was calling you into a different sphere, and you probably didn't know it when you were in, second, third, fourth grade. But I'm sure as you got older and graduated from high school and college, you got into this area where you thought, hey, I really feel like God is calling me here. So how did you
Mm.
get started with writing novels?
Writing novels. Well, I was actually a caretaker for a little while for someone in my family. So I was stuck at home. Had a day job, but then I would rush home and be at home and not know what to do with myself. Um, this was not somebody that was real responsive. So it was a difficult thing to know what to do. And so I took this family story that my grandma had told me about her father when he'd come from Norway. His father came ahead and set up, and then 10 years later, the rest of the family came and found out that he had found another wife and that there were more kids. And so there were like two very separate sides of the family. And I was just blown away that this existed in my family, and I had no idea. And the things that my great grandfather went through were somehow paralleling the things that I was going through in my life. And so I threw these big questions up to God, and I was like, okay, let's untangle this. Help me figure this out because I'm at a loss here, God. I'm stuck. And so we untangled it in this novel. I never published it, but it's called By Bread Alone. And I worked through a lot of the bigger questions that I had for God. And then it just became like this ongoing conversation. And it was like stories were like the language that he and I spoke. And so that was my first novel. And I totally got sucked into the idea of storytelling.
Wow, that's really interesting. And so, at what point did you start publishing your books?
When I started having kids, actually. I tried to get published before that and did not get anywhere. I would get rejections or no response. So when I started having kids, I just thought, well, I'll shelve this for a decade or so, come back to it later. But then it was like God was like, nope, this is exactly. You didn't even ask me if you should quit. This is when I want you to get published, when you're busiest, when you're trying to be a mom and you have newborns. So I quit my job the day my daughter was born. And so in the whole afternoon, she was a newborn, she would sleep. And I was like, well, what do I do with my brain? Like, what are you supposed to do? And so I sat down and I just started writing this scene that was for fun. And it just kept going and kept going. It's like, well, this is really cool. And it became this conversation with God and this spiritual thing. And that became my debut novel.
Wow, that's really cool. So, you have a novel out right now. It just came out April 15th. This is what
Yes.
it looks like. The Curious Inheritance of Blakely House. So tell us a little bit about the book. Don't give away too much, but just enough to make people want to follow that link or go to Amazon.com and buy the book.
So this was a unique book for me to write. It's got a steampunk vibe, which I've never done before. I write Victorian, like historical romance mystery.
Mhm.
And so this little steampunk vibe actually comes from my husband. He's an engineer. And we are so opposite in our skill sets that I thought it'd be really fun if we joined forces. So his brilliance met my storytelling. And so this is a story of gadgets and gears and a woman who is neurodivergent and who she understands clocks and how they work to like the nth degree, but not people. And so she's stumbling through trying to figure out how to just, I guess, exist in the world. And she inherits this mansion from an uncle who's an industrialist, and it's filled with like all these inventions he never finished. And when she gets there, she finds out there's other people who think they've also inherited, and they also think that because he went to go see her before he died to check out if she was a good heir, that she has killed him. And so that's the setup for the story. And so she gets to know this uncle she never met through his house and his inventions and the love letters that he wrote to his sweetheart. And they were separated for a while. And so it was this the house became a character, and the house is based on a real house called Craigside in Northumberland. And there's just tons of like, there's automatons and clocks that are like rewired to do different things, like compasses and things like that. It was so much fun. It was just a blast.
Sounds super interesting. So this one is out right now. So what are you working on? I'm sure you've got another book that you're working on right now. You probably have one that's in editing. That seems like that's what I hear all of the time.
Yes. So I have projects. I can't say too much yet, but I do have some projects in the works, and the next stuff will be set in Cornwall.
Okay, well, that sounds really interesting. So you've got 8 books that are out right now. Who is your favorite character that you've written about so far?
Oh, goodness. A lot of them. I think there's a woman in the Love Note, which was my 4th book. She's an older woman who's kind of a loose cannon. Like, she just says things. And she was so, like, wise and intelligent. She said very, very simple things, but they were just really wise. Everything that came out of her mouth, I don't know where it came from, but it was so cool. And she was just such a fun, unique, interesting character. I loved the hero in A Midnight Dance. He's actually a ballet dancer, but he's just so, like, brilliant and powerful and fun. He was really kind of a playful guy. So he was so much fun to write.
That's awesome. So speaking of fun, what is something that you like to do for fun when you're not writing books and coming up with plots and taking care of kids and
Writing books is, actually the smaller fraction of my life. The larger fraction is being a mom, and a lot of my fun is adventuring with my kids. So when it's raining this afternoon, we're gonna be probably mud puddle jumping,
oh,
and
fun.
we climb trees, and we hunt for certain flowers, and do bug catching, and raise butterflies, and, lots and lots of simple rural type, activities, and we just have so much fun together.
And helping
Lots of
them learn as you explore the world around them.
Yes, and we're homeschooling too, so that kinda helps.
Yeah, that's
Um,
really neat.
yeah, I also play the piano, I read a lot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I go running.
Well, you had me up until the running part, you know? I don't think I'm not so sure about the running part, but no, it's really interesting, and, Joanna, thank you so much for being a guest. Hey, all of our viewers out there, go and pick up her book, support what it is that she's doing. You can go to Amazon.com and just do a search for her name. Again, it's the Curious Inheritance of Blakely House. And Rob's got the QR code right there up on the screen. Thank you so much for being a part of our show.
It was such an honor, thank you for having me.
Rob, it was so much fun talking to Joanna. And one of the things that I loved most about our conversation with her is when she talked about wanting to do things with her kids.
Was so neat. And thinking even the excitement of jumping in puddles and stuff
Yes.
like that. How cool is that? Another thing that both Kristen and I have a love for is politics.
Yes.
And this next interview
Lauren Cooley
is so much involved in what is currently happening in the political world. And we think this interview is fantastic. It's always good to get a chance to interview new people here on the Rob and Kristen show. And I think this one's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, definitely. I am so looking forward to this interview. You and I love talking politics, we love talking current events, and I think she fits right into that conversation.
And so we want to, without further ado, and because we've got so much we want to cover with her, please welcome Lauren Cooley. There she is to the show. And it is so good to have you here. For those of in our audience that don't know who you are, give a little bit of a background, who you are, and tell our people about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for letting me join you. My name's Lauren Cooley. I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs for the Institute for Faith and Culture. We're a biblical worldview organization where we believe that while your faith is deeply personal, it's not to remain private. And so we equip Christians for this cultural moment to be salt and light in their spheres of influence. My background, I came from the world of politics, so I love politics, I love current events. But I feel strongly that Christians need to show up and be a part of the conversation, whether it's national conversation or it's local and in their backyard. God's called us to be salt and light. And part of doing that is knowing what's going on in the world around you and being equipped and encouraged and educated and trained on being salt and light.
So, for our viewers who may not be involved with anything right now, and maybe this is the first time that they have heard, hey, you need to go out and actually be involved in your community and in politics and current events and shaping the world around them. what is one of the things that they can do to just kind of get their feet wet?
Yeah, I think that everything starts with having a robust theology, which will lead to your political philosophy, which then can lead to action. And so, for folks that really haven't thought about this before, I know Christians know all about the Great Commission: go and share the gospel, share it to the nations. But we also have a cultural mandate, and that's starts in Genesis, and it's about uh, "Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And so I would say start with just learning about why, as Christians, we're compelled. It's a mandate from Scripture to be involved in areas beyond just the four walls of your home or the four walls of your church. If you want to get involved on a real practical level, find a local group that represents one issue you care about. For believers, a lot of times you can find a pro-life organization. Maybe they do something like sidewalk counseling, or maybe it's mentorship for young moms. That's a really neat opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus, serving other people in a community that is in so much need. Maybe that's not an area that you're interested in. Maybe you want to do something completely different. Go to your supervisor of elections and see if you can help with election integrity, with supervising ballots when they're being counted, not just in a big presidential election, but maybe something like a local election for city council or something of that nature, school board. There's so many different ways to get involved, but I think the first thing really goes back to understanding not just what you believe, but why you believe it.
Hey, I want to ask a question because you have been doing this a while. Do you think we're seeing more Christians involved now than maybe 5 years ago?
It's funny you asked that question because you remember, I'm sure, the news cycle that said Christians were going to stay home and not participate in the 2024 election. And I think it was this boogeyman of a story that actually mobilized the church to move and to be more active than perhaps otherwise would have been. So now with President Trump in office, I think there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of interest, especially when you look at some of the immediate changes he made in his first week in office when it comes to religious liberty. But I don't want Christians to become complacent. The answer certainly isn't a politician. It's not Donald Trump. The answer is the gospel of Jesus Christ, and it's bringing righteousness to our communities. And we do that through being active. And so this is a great opportunity for Christians to get more involved. I think we're seeing some of that, but I don't want it to be something where, well, we got the guy we wanted in the White House and we can just rest on our laurels. No, now is really when the work starts. And so I'm hopeful that Christians won't get lazy, won't get complacent, but really will use this as an opportunity to advance our Christian principles forward in this country.
I think one of the things that we see a lot of times is just people in the church stating, well, if it's God's will. And they just think that that means that it doesn't necessarily matter what they do, whatever God wants is going to happen. But I don't think that probably the three of us look at it that way. God expects us to get involved. And I'm really curious from my perspective, how in the world did you ever get started in this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I've loved politics since I was young. Nothing like one specific moment that made me conservative or activated me. I kind of just enjoyed it ever since I took an eighth grade civics class. But I know for friends of mine, it's one issue that really sparks them. They have an aha moment. And then it leads to everything else. At the Institute for Faith and Culture, we're a relatively young organization, but we're born out of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church in Fort Lauderdale. We have a 60 plus year history of encouraging Christians to be involved in politics and in the public square and really every sphere of culture, whether that's music and arts, that's entertainment, it's education, it's work and economics, and of course the family. And so we were fortunate to have a founding pastor that really was ahead of his time in many ways back in the 70s and 80s, helped found the Moral Majority. So we're kind of the next generation carrying on that legacy of encouraging Christians to get off the sidelines, get out of the pews, and make a difference. Because certainly, if it's God's will, things will happen. But God created us for a reason. And we're part of the story that's unfolding. And furthermore, when it comes to things like civic participation, your vote, your activism is really a part of stewardship. And so, certainly, God's will unfold whether we participate or not. But I think that we are called to be a part of that story.
I love that. I love that. And I think the big thing, and I don't know if you agree with me this or not, is I think we need to get really grassroots. I think we need to be involved in school elections and things like that. Don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Because there's going to be a table with seats at the table. And if Christians aren't filling those seats, someone else will. And so, for people who don't like politics, I say, well, I don't really love politics either, but politics permeates everything. So if you care about loving your neighbor as yourself, if you care about taking care of those who are less fortunate, all these very basic biblical principles, you have to be involved. You're compelled to be involved. And so things like school board, my goodness, you look at what's going on in some of these local counties, school boards, the pornographic material that's allowed down in Florida. We have a great governor who's done a lot to remove that, but there are still liberal counties that have absolutely horrible curriculum and books that are available. There's teachers that are pushing pronouns and things of that nature for children that are as young as kindergarten. That can only happen when the people of God remove themselves from the equation. We know the Bible says righteousness exalts a nation, and our nation can't be righteous without good men and women speaking morality and particularly biblical principles into the public square.
And that goes back to what you were saying early on, is that we as Christians need to be the influencers in our sphere. So whether it's where you're working or whether you're a teacher, or it doesn't matter where you're at, you should be the influencer and not somebody else around you, because if we are the ones influencing our spheres, then our spheres are going to influence and overlap other spheres.
That's right. And everybody has a different sphere of influence, right? So for a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, that sphere of influence may be different than a stay at home mom, but it doesn't mean that one is more important than the other. In fact, I would say the stay at home mom may have an even more important sphere of influence with the next generation. But God has tasked you with individuals in your life that you are either responsible for or you make an impact on. And so, if again, it goes back to these very basic principles of if you love your neighbor, if you care about the Great Commission and sharing the gospel, all these things rest upon having a country that has some type of moral fabric, particularly when it comes to religious liberty. I think that's one of the greatest freedoms that we have. And we've seen with different presidential administrations and even some local governments and things through COVID, the crackdown on our freedoms and our rights. In order for us as Christians to carry out what God has called us to do, you have no choice but to be involved at some level.
What do you see as a as an issue over the next year that is really gonna percolate to the top as far as politically that is gonna affect Christians?
Yeah, I think there's probably two issues that are already very hot button issues that are going to become, I guess, stumbling blocks for Christians who aren't well educated on their theology, which leads to their political philosophy. And those two issues are DEI and immigration. They're already polarizing to begin with. With DEI, there's an active plan by the federal government to remove it from things like public spaces, such as the military, such as public school. But we're also seeing a little bit of a retreat from DEI in private companies as well. Um, I think that Christians need to reclaim the conversation instead of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the Imago Dei. Every person is made in the image of God. If we're able to articulate that, that's such a much deeper level than, oh, I don't like DEI because it puts different people against each other. I don't like DEI because I'm for equal opportunity versus equal outcomes. Certainly those are decent talking points, but what fuels that? I think it's that we're made in the image of God. Secondly, with immigration, another hot button issue, very polarizing. But I think the Bible talks a lot about immigration, a lot about nation states. You look at the accounts of the Israelites, you look at the Tower of Babel and the disbursement of many different people with different languages and different cultures. So if we can, as Christians, know our Bible better when it applies to issues of politics, culture, and policy, I think that Christians will be able to better own the conversation and speak to it in a positive way. The secular left would love to demonize us and make us the bad guys. But the whole reason that we're talking about being involved in politics is because we love our neighbor, because we want what's best for our community, what's best for our country, and ultimately the world.
That is awesome. You're seeing that in many social media places where Christians are like, "Well, I don't feel comfortable about immigration," and you're like, "I don't feel comfortable about murderers being on the street either." So, but just saying.
Yeah.
I really love what you were saying about really changing our perspective. And that's what it sounds like. Something that we would encourage everybody out there to do is just start to look at how you think about things and how maybe do you need to retrain your mind, and instead of allowing the media, whether it's secular or Christian media, whatever, it doesn't matter, but instead of allowing everybody else to tell you how you should think, dig into the word of God and figure out what does God have to say about this. And I think retraining our minds are something that it sounds like it's so important with what it is that you're doing. And because it all goes back to what you said at the very beginning about thy kingdom come and really making an influence on everything. So, what are some of the things that you're really working on right now?
Yeah, as a biblical worldview organization, we have tons of resources, and so we would offer those to folks that are looking to learn more. Everything from written format to videos and weekly podcasts. Um, we have commentary on cultural issues. We have things that are more grounded in theology, but we would certainly encourage folks to go to our website, institutefc.org, and learn more about that. We also have courses and some curriculum. And then we have an annual worldview conference called Kingdom Come, ironically, but with that name specifically with a nod to what we've talked about. And so we're really excited about that conference. We're going to have a lot of well-known speakers: Riley Gaines, Stephen Mansfield, Allie Beth Stuckey, and several others. But we would invite anyone who wants to come down to Fort Lauderdale to join us. You can learn more about that on our website as well, institutefc.org.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. You have been a fantastic breath of fresh air and to kind of get this topic rolling, and we appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to join you.
Such a neat interview with Lauren Cooley. Makes you really want to get involved locally in politics. We appreciate Lauren. Going to have a lot more interviews like that also. Not only are we going to do some writers, but we've got political stuff coming up next season. Can you believe we're already talking about next season?
I really can't, but we have some great interviews lined up for next season
Next
already.
Yep.
But we're not quite done with this season.
Got a few more weeks left of this year. Hey, listen, we want to thank the great folks at 7 Weeks Coffee. That's 7weekscoffee.com. Use the promo code ATV10 and get your coffee. They do a fantastic job, and we appreciate them so very much. And you know what we want you to do? Go out and live an abundant life.